Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Fireside Chat. Thank you for spending your time with us. I hope Google Next is off to a great start for all of you. I am thrilled to have this session. I'm going to start by introducing you, Michael Fey. Michael Fey is the co-founder and CEO of a very cool startup, Island. So maybe we'll start by tell us a little bit about you and what does Island do?
Sure. Well, thanks for having us. Happy to be here and appreciate the partnership. Island, we founded Island almost 6 years ago. The realization was, if we looked at the browser as it became our primary operating system, I mean, all this great tech we interface through that platform, and we think about what that platform was targeted for, it really wasn't targeted at the knowledge worker. And we saw the opportunity to look at how we can make the knowledge worker more productive, more capable, more efficient, and then the IT stack that supported them. How do you collapse that? How do you reduce that? How do you build that for the modern age? And then finally embedding cybersecurity into that. And so 6 years later, we've got about 800 customers, 5 million browsers out there, some of the largest logos like Citigroup, B of A, UHG, we're how you go to work.
Yeah. So it's, as you all know, it's probably one of the most interesting times to ever be building a startup. Obviously, we have the confluence of a number of big trends playing out. And maybe I'll start by talking for a couple of minutes on the trends as we're seeing them, and then I will sort of dig into each of them. So right now, obviously, we're seeing the mega trend playing out is AI. AI, it's no exaggeration to say AI is going to change the way we live our lives. But in the enterprise market, it's also changing everything. We are going through what we believe is a generational refactoring of every part of the enterprise IT stack as companies look to be AI native and sort of rethink their business models, their workflows, how work is done in their company. That's obviously also changing cybersecurity, and probably cybersecurity is the most changed part of the enterprise IT landscape, because what you're seeing is AI is causing new adversaries to show up on the threat landscape, new techniques, new attack surfaces, and new methods of defense. And so there's so much change happening, and typically when there's a change like that, there's huge opportunities for startups.
Yes.
And so maybe let's start there a little bit to say, okay, you're a startup, you want to do something big, how should you think about your own cybersecurity? Because as a startup, you're a small company. If you're a 10-person company, you typically don't have a CISO.
Yeah.
You're typically running as fast as possible to build features. Why should you worry about cybersecurity?
Well, the why you should worry is almost the right to exist. At the end of the day, it is an existential crisis. If you were breached, if you were drawn into suspect, that would end your company, because trust is all a young company can get. It's so hard for an established company to invest in a startup to begin with, right? Where's the other reference customers? Where can I get confirmation you're going to do right by me? And if in that process a discovery of a security issue occurs, and that's not just a breach happening, that's the worst case, but everyone's going to red team you. Everyone's going to send your product through something. If in that process they discover something, and they will discover some things, that's not the issue. If they discover things they shouldn't, you should have designed this out. You should not have this. This is not the sign of a well-built company. You're dead in the water. And that leaks out and it permeates out. So it's a right to exist. It's a requirement of breathing as a startup, much more than it ever was.
Now, who in a startup should worry about security? You don't have a CISO. You may or may not have a CIO. So is it the engineering team, the CEO, who should worry about it?
Yeah, I mean, every startup's different in the makeup of the founders, right? But in general, and the ones I work with, and then obviously at Island, we were those owners, the founders themselves. And we had to be, because it was about the architecture you choose, the product you built, how you handled it, the risk you were willing to take, the things you didn't want to negotiate on. It was strategic level decisions that to this day we leverage, that if they were made elsewhere, one, we wouldn't own them, we might not fully understand them, and we certainly want to propagate them forward. So I don't know a way a founder isn't the primary owner for a very long time, much like we have to own sales. Both are very important.
Right. Of all the things that then, okay, so the founders are thinking about it, you want to move quickly and build the features and compete with, or get some traction before any entrenched players sort of wake up to the opportunity. What are the top security areas that you should prioritize while you're building your product?
Yeah, well, one's really, really obvious, which is what data do you take on? What data from the customer do you bring into your environment? A lot of mistakes early startups will make is more data is better. Why not? We'll filter it out later. We'll figure out exactly what we're going to build. But the reality is every time you take a piece of sensitive data on, you've increased your risk and your pain. And if this risk doesn't scare you, the pain should. When a customer starts to analyze, like in our case, having built a browser itself, we could see everything. First thing a customer says to us is, what do you do with my data? You keep it, Mr. Customer. All of a sudden, knives are down, swords are down. Oh, it's ours, you don't take it back. Okay, we need to confirm that, but that's great. If I start pulling back critical data, now I have to go through their data audits. I have to live up to their security standards. And there's no way 100, a 200, a 500-person company can live up to JPMC standards. Like, you just don't have the means. They have more people in security than you have in your whole company. You have to appreciate that. So I think that's a fundamental requirement. And then
Can I ask you on that one?
Please.
And then we'll come back to the rest of this. Because there's going to be a temptation to say, look, but the more data I get, the more I can mine it, the more I can. And so there's that tension of like, don't we want that data?
So it's not a question whether you want it or not. It's just when do you take it? You know, the customers aren't sitting there governing, oh, you didn't pull this extra piece of data, you know, now you can't have it. It's that relationship, just out of the gate, limit it. And if you do take a lot of data, that's fine, cleanse it. Anonymize the customer, remove the PII data, remove the elements that are going to be your nightmare later. And it's so funny, people skip that because of speed. Well, wait till you go through your audits. Wait till you have to go back. You have crushed your speed to an absolute minimum. You can run fast when your data's not risky. When your data's risky, everything you do moves to a crawl.
Got it. So first point, thoughtful about what data you take on and when you take it on, how long you keep it. And okay, so what else would you prioritize?
The second one is first understand you're not a big company. The bulk of the cyber tools and the cyber requests and the requirements of what, you know, Fortune 5000 feels is a fundamental list, it's not your list. You are not a heterogeneous environment with legacy items and new items and multinational requirements. I mean, many of the things aren't even your problem. You know, GDPR, where are you selling? It may not even be something you need to think about right now. So, you know, thinking about that and limiting that scope. And when you do that, the scope gets very simple. Where are we doing work? And more than likely, you're cloud-centric. So it's about your relationship from your device to the cloud. We don't need the backhaul. We don't need a bunch of DLP. We don't need a lot of things. We need single sign-on, MFA. We need to be able to validate the identity and then have a data barrier. Data barrier saying that we can, with honest, you know, trust with the customer, your data doesn't leave this domain. Here's where it sits. It doesn't move. Our code doesn't move out of that. It is such a simpler world, and you have to use that for your own advantage. Otherwise, you can't keep up. So having that decision of what a viable workspace is and doing it well will set you up very nicely.
Got it. Okay, so now you're in an unusual position in the sense that you're a co-founder, you're technical, and you're the CEO. But for many companies here, say you are the co-founder who's the head of engineering, and you think, okay, I've got the basic security blocks that I want to put into place. These are important. How do you make the case to a CEO that this is something worth spending on when obviously there's so many other things you could be spending on?
You know, I think it's actually pretty simple in the early days because you have to choose these tools anyways. You have to choose how we're going to develop, how we're going to store this, how we're going to do that. If those decisions were made with security in mind, you're not going to the CEO saying, I need a big budget. I need to modify this. As you created the instance, as you built your methodology, it was just part of it. You know, I can't even tell you what we spent on cybersecurity in the early days because it was just built into the basic enablement of the company. Now, I was thinking when you were asking that, if you really are one of these founders that maybe you're legal, you're building a legal company and you're brilliant on legal and you've never touched IT, how do you get to that space? I think that's what security advisories are for. When you go out and get an advisor, give them some shares, bring them into the fold, and have them help you through that if it's not your core instinct. It is a little bit of advice will save you so much money long term and make you way nimbler.
That's great. All right, so you've put together then sort of the core security architecture for your company. How do you govern it? Who's responsible then for security? How do you report on it? Do you take it to your board early on? How do you think about managing it going forward?
Yeah, you obviously have to have a plan, and there has to be a governance model. And as soon as you're big enough, there needs to be an owner. You know, the saying, if everybody owns it, nobody does, is really true in cybersecurity, right? Who really cares about it? So you need to have that. You need to build your incident plan. You need to map where your data lives. You need to have, you know, controls in place. And you do need to report on it. The same ways you have to report on resiliency. Both of those can get lost in the shuffle, especially with non-technical founders. When you go to the board, though, they're going to evaluate you early on. Is this your area of expertise? Do you have this covered? If you do, it will be a minor conversation at the board moving forward. If you don't, it will be a perpetual check-in with the board to make sure you didn't drop the ball. And it is amazing. I'm on a couple different boards where, you know, because of those early days and lack of vision, it is forever a board inspection point. And I have others where they were ahead of it when the board asked questions like, oh yeah, we built this, we're doing this, and it gets set to the we trust you, you know, just show us the governance model as you go.
That's great. Now, I've heard you say publicly that cybersecurity and cyber defense has never been stronger than before. And yet, it's never been more challenging than before.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about what do you mean by that?
Well, I think we have a control for everything. You know, if you hit, RSA was a couple weeks ago or months ago, I don't know. Maybe last week, I don't know. It was recent. Man, that show floor had what, 5,000 vendors? There is a vendor for every problem you could possibly have, and that is almost the problem. Is how do I, especially as a young company, navigate through this madness and do what's required? And then we start to have holes in the gaps, right, between the different tools and what they report, and the data is overwhelming. Simplifying our environment is really, really important. Luckily, in a startup world, it starts very simple, nothing, and then you build out from there. But choosing wisely how you do that. And I think AI creates a fundamental opportunity to change the way we do all of this. And right now.
Yeah. I want to pick on something you said a little while ago, because I think it's really important, especially today, which is, you know, we talked about trust and how important, the reason security is important to a startup is, you know, you're building trust and you don't have this history. And so if you fumble it at the beginning, it's kind of gone. So let's talk about, you know, you have the marketing co-founder, and is there a way for startup, even if their core business isn't security, to start to think about building in a trust message? If you're a legal startup or a marketing startup, or how should they think about building trust into their message, even if they're not a security company?
I think that security by design, whether you're a marketing, you know, bent individual or not, you should be able to speak to why you made the decisions you did. So as a customer speaks about where their data lives, how it works, you should be able to say, our job was to do these things. So we chose this methodology. We have these architectures in place to do that. That helps a little, but staying one step ahead. Like, don't go get your SOC 2 when you're asked for it. You have it in advance. Don't come up with a data protection strategy when asked for it. Have it in advance. The speed at which you answer those questions. One of the things that I always had prepared for is we had almost, 500 questions we could get asked in a first meeting.
Wow.
All of them documented. We'd literally sit there in the first meeting and I'd check off which ones were asked. And then an email would follow. You followed this. Here's the documented plan for this. Here's the documented plan for that. If you wait days for that, weeks for that, looks like you built it. If you wait seconds, everyone knows you're living it. And having that available to you allows somebody who maybe doesn't have their finger on the pulse of that particular area, like cybersecurity, to show that it is important in their company and it is well thought out and somebody is the gatekeeper.
Got it. So let's keep going on the idea that cybersecurity is stronger than it's ever been, in the sense that if you've talked a little bit about areas that a startup should think about in terms of security, even up front.
Yeah.
So maybe it's time to plug Island, but also other vendors. If you had to pick the short list of vendors that you would say, look, almost every startup should look at, either you can say category or vendor, but you know, this should be in your essential toolkit. Yeah,
I think, especially we're talking startups right now, I think a secure workspace is important. At Island, we deliver it via browser, an extension, or a desktop service, and what that allows us to do is to create a data barrier around the critical items. So we can treat that laptop as a dangerous zone, but now you're writing code. Inside of that, nothing can penetrate you. Now you're working with customer data. Inside of that, nothing can occur. And we can delete and remove the residual effects of that, so it stays slim. And the core concept isn't you'll never get breached. Not a single company in here can withstand an enemy nation state attack. It will happen. What is the blast radius that occurs? If you get on my laptop as CEO at Island, you get nothing. You literally get nothing from me. You might read an email or two. Congratulations, I'm very boring. It's not going to be interesting. But it is not the on-ramp to our customer data, to our code, to those elements. That blast radius is absolutely essential in the process. What you should avoid, backhauling your stuff. You don't need things like SaaS-based web filtering. You don't need, to backhaul. You don't need VDI. You don't need big DLP programs. None of those things are required because you don't have the complexity needed for those. Your world is simple. Salesforce data stays in Salesforce. Your sales reps don't need to export it. That's not how they're living. Development occurs in a couple IDEs. It goes a specific path. You don't need to enable the world. Where when you become the size of, say, a Citigroup, there's probably one of everything, and you do have to fundamentally re-architect how you do things. That ability to be specific about how your world works, that is your security moat. That is your protective layer. Understanding that allows you to close so much. So even like vulnerability management, if you have 10 things that represent your environment, it's easy to stay on top of them. So it's not a hard path if you've defined your world and you made it clearly. I mean, at Island, still to this day, we let you buy your own laptop. We just send you a link to a browser and you're off and going.
Nothing on it.
That's it. We get you your identity stack, we give you that, and that's all we need to do to conduct business for the DoD.
Love that. All right, let's keep building on that idea, which is one of the challenges for many organizations is not just hackers, but shadow IT, shadow AI even. So say you're the CEO of a startup, maybe somebody here, you walk in and your head of marketing is like, guys, this is great. I have this amazing tool, OpenClaw. It's free. I've got all these skills that I can use to do great marketing for us. What is the problem with shadow AI for startups? Everybody's scrappy. Everybody wants to save money.
Yeah.
Get a lot of these free tools.
Well, I mean, we saw recently where an entire startup's code base is out there. It's hard to be unique and differentiating when everything's out there. I do think shadow IT is a very scary scenario, and it's accidental. We love Gemini. I think it's great. Which Gemini am I using? The corporate one or the one I was using at home? I forgot which one I'm in. So you do have to have a bit of a governance model. And what often founders do and people that care about security do that kills them is they deploy a heavy-handed model that lowers productivity. Security, it's not security versus risk. That's not at a startup where it is. That's where your banks are. Yeah. That's where your large retailers are. Where we're at is security versus productivity. If your security doesn't impede my productivity, I'll play along. I'll work in your world. But my deadlines matter more than your security. So if your security is slowing me down, inherently, as that developer that cares, as that guy that's coding all night, I'm going to go around it because I know how. I can use my own tools. I can use my own AI. So it really is about working with them, monitoring the estate enough that you can see when people are out of that path, not to go block it, to understand why. I thought I set you up with the tools you needed. You didn't. Great. What else do I have to bring you? And that's what shadow IT in the early days is. Later, it is about redirecting work. I'm in Box, not OneDrive. OneDrive is a corporate standard. Okay, get to the corporate standard. Why'd you choose one over the other, right? That's not going to work. We're coding in this environment, not that. That standardization matters, but early on, it's what do you need to get your job done, and how do I enable that for you, and how do we bring it in an appropriate way? And it will all come out. At the end of the day, you will have a customer that cares. They will dive into your environment, and they will see how the data flows and where things live. And at that point, it's make or break time for your company. Too late to do it. Yeah, you're right. I mean, one of the things we've seen very clearly is that, the adversaries are all over shadow AI. Yes.
When we, VirusTotal from Google partnered with OpenClaw, we found over 800 skills that were just straight up malware.
Yeah.
In fact, several weeks in a row, the top downloaded skill was malware. And so, it's been discovered, it's a known vector into your company. All right, let's pivot into a different area, which is, with all this change in cybersecurity, there are probably some companies here that are looking at cybersecurity and thinking, is this an opportunity for me to do a company in this area? But the other side of that argument is, some people are saying, oh no, the models are going to just sort of eat the whole area, and there are entire segments of security that people are wondering if they're going to exist. Yeah. How do you look at this landscape and say, where do you think the winners are? What are the areas that you think are
So when I look at this area, I kind of go back to the early days of the big hyperscalers, right? And all the little guys, we used to complain that We'd come up with a good idea, and you guys would copy it and steal it. And it was all this nefarious behavior.
I mean, not me personally.
Yeah, that's right. Not you. And not Google. It was the other guys.
The other guys.
But the reality was, looking back, that's not what happened. They're going to build what they need to win their space. That's what they're focused on. They're not focused on, I need to steal your revenue, your TAM. They've got plenty, as you guys have seen. But when you think about, Anthropic battling Google, battling Microsoft, where is that battle going to occur? Stay out of that way. That's not where you want to be. That's where you wake up and I built a startup that is now a feature of a bigger entity. So you could kind of see it coming. With generation of code as a primary AI valuable asset and one of the true ROIs of driving it, of course code scanning would come next. How do you differentiate your code being written better by somebody else's? So you can kind of start to play that out. If you're going to do this, what happens next? So then it was design. Obviously, we're going to build a product. We want it to look better than the other guys. We should have a good design system, and so on and so forth. So I think you've got to do that whenever you have a bright idea and understand that. Mm-hmm. And the other part that's unique because of the AI bent is, cybersecurity has lived in a world of no. We're going to block. I can't tell you how many seed level pitches I hear about blocking. Block this, block that. Nobody cares. They want to hear enablement. How do you turn it on? How do you let me use these things? How do I go faster? How do I move faster? That's what they want. And so the next generation of startups should start there. These things are hard to do today because of cybersecurity. How could I reshape a product to make it easy, to make it flow, to make it quick, to make it efficient? That's what Island became. We didn't really understand that at the time, but that's been our big win is, boy, things are just easier with us. It's more cost effective, it's more efficient. You get to say yes, you get to allow more, and that drives sales way more than the boogeyman's out there and I stop them. Those days, there's too many threats out there to worry about to think of a singular threat driving a deal structure. It is about a class of capability and how you deliver it versus the rest of the world.
No, that's exactly right. It feels like that's the big opportunity where everybody wants to move to an AI native, agentic enterprise, and they all see the challenges.
Yeah.
And they want help addressing it. What they don't want is, you can't do this.
Yes.
Especially with the pace of adoption that's happening right now. AI is being adopted more quickly than, frankly, any other big IT trend that I've seen ever, right? In Europe. Let's talk about that in your own company then. How are you using AI internally?
Boy, everywhere, all the time, period. Even our sales reps, if they're not leveraging heavy, we've got a problem. Mm-hmm. So for us at first, we opened the doors wide and said, this is the future, everybody lean in. Development was the first place that we focused on, like many, right? And then it was, having agents work for themselves and governing those agents and the guardrails around those agents. All that became very, very important. Then it's about delivering quotes, competitive information, real-time views, triaging issues. It is a very, very pervasive. And one of the things as a founder that I felt was, I had 200 engineers, okay? Decent amount for one product. It's a fairly sizable engineering team. If I enabled them incredibly well on AI, and we literally built them great tooling, great education, then I couldn't be caught from behind by a team of 10 guys that are really good at it, right? It would take another team of 200 to get me. Everybody's worried about their moat. Well, if you're the best at what you do, efficiently, capable, you are the moat. You are the attacker. And that's the beautiful part. We're not standing on, as startups, a massive code base that we have to replicate. We're building our code now. So we felt if we really leaned into that, that would be a competitive advantage for us long term. And it's also requiring for recruiting. The bulk of my R&D is in Israel. It's a highly competitive recruiting environment. A strong developer does not want to go to a company that doesn't have a great AI plan because they realize their future won't be bright. So if you want to recruit well, you better have a good plan for it. You better have a team that enables it and tools it and pushes it forward. And everybody in the process has to be deep in it. It's funny. I don't go grocery shopping without it. Like literally, I get the list I want to do. I feed it in. It tells me where it's at in the aisles. And that was kind of the level of adoption I wanted inside our company. If we were going to be a part of that next wave, we had to embrace it, as oxygen.
Yeah, listening to it, it's a reminder that some of the old, sort of understandings or even contracts have really changed. Meaning, it used to be that the small companies moved quickly, changed, embraced change, and the bigger companies moved more slowly, but they would watch and learn. And that's not true anymore in the sense that, we look at the most aggressive adopters of AI. They're some of the largest companies in the world. They're in regulated industries like healthcare and utilities and so on. I mean, I think we put out a press release today, or one of our announcements today said that even at Google, over 75% of the code we generate at Google is now generated using AI. We have hundreds and hundreds of use cases that we're using AI in, from how we manage treasury, to logistics. And on the one hand, you can say, of course, we expect that from Google, but if you go to Verizon, if you go to BMW, we're seeing that. So to your point, the old contract of, hey, we're a startup, we can move faster than the big guys. Well, that's changed.
Yeah.
The nature of the moat has changed. We're seeing 1 or 2 person companies that are billion-dollar companies now. And so the flip is true as well, which is it used to be that if you were a big company, you were saying our moat is we're a big company. We can go after these big markets and have big supply chains and marketing, and we're safe from these little startups. And that's not true anymore either. So the contract has all been sort of torn up to say...
It has.
Yeah.
It has. It is night and day from what it was. And a feature won't define you, because you can get that feature in a hurry, right? So your motive, I think, is the focus. Right? Do you have context? Do you have an understanding? Do you have expertise? Do you get the problem better? Do you get it deeper? And are you building something that truly is valuable? And that's the other thing I think AI has, changed the contract with. A cool GUI is not a thing, right? It's literally, okay, great, I'll build that tomorrow, right? We built an email client in 3 days that runs on the iPhone. It's great, looks exactly like everybody else's email client. So once upon a time, we founded the company, said, I'd love an email client. Too hard, won't worry about it. Yeah, okay, a weekend, we have an email client.
So let's pick on it. Okay, so you're saying it's not that you have a big engineering base, that's not your moat. For a while, everybody used to think if you had proprietary data, that's your moat, or proprietary distribution, that's your moat, but what do you think the real moats are? If you play it out a year from now, is everybody just going to constantly run as fast as possible because there's no real moat, or what are some sources of moats? Yeah,
I think there's a moat, one around deployment, obviously, and that's the bigger guys, right? If you're out there and deployed, that matters. Despite everyone's aggressive adoption, there are only so many people to do things. And if something's working, there is a change from that. But then I think it's really about the ROI you're driving. That's why this AI thing has been so different. If you're driving superior ROI to the people next to you, you built the right product. And when we think about why would a BMW, a T-Mobile, T-Mobile's a little different, but why would a BMW or a Coca-Cola be aggressive on an AI? It's ROI. It's not love affair tech. It's just look at the money I can save. If you've got 100,000 front desk workers and you need 50,000, that's huge. And that drives it. So I think clarity on the problem scape and the delivery of that, and back to good old-fashioned ROI use case selling, where it is clear you've delivered on that, that's your key to selling it. Then the architecture has to be defendable. And that is where you can have real defense. Not everybody's tech is created equal. There are challenges in adopting the different elements and the refinement of that. We found AI is great for getting us to the 80% marker. The 20% the rest of the way, we have to lean in a little bit. But that still can be dealt with AI, but the effort isn't on the product now, it's on the AI. And putting the energy around that. That starts to become a long-term mode as well.
Yeah, and that connects to a point we touched on earlier, which is trust.
Yes.
Trust becomes a moat too, because if you bet on a company and things are moving so fast, where if business is moving at the speed of agents and there aren't humans in every loop, you've got to trust that you're bringing in a company into your environment, they're not going to take you down, which they can today in a scale and speed that they couldn't before.
You're so right. I think you have to have a resiliency plan. So, outages, how do you impact that? You have to have a security plan. But then trust also on features. One of the things we did at Island that turned out to just be an absolute godsend is we kept a big part of our R&D available to customers at all times. So we wanted to always be a design partner with a customer, still to this day. 80% of our feature requests get delivered in 21 days or less.
That's great.
The trust that gives to a customer is, you might not have the product I need, but you will. And so I can work with you and put the energy in on that. They've got other vendors like, I've asked for that for years, haven't got it, won't get it, looking for another solution. And I'd like to think that where we've done our job right, we get first dibs on that evolution opposed to an alternate solution. And that trust that you'll do the right thing, you'll do it at speed, you'll do it at scale, you'll do it safely, securely. It's the only compounding advantage you have.
So let's talk about, if you're building today, chances are you're building on a hyperscaler, chances are you're using one of the frontier models. You guys have been very successful. What are tips and tricks for the startups here around how to work successfully with the frontier models, with hyperscalers? What can you expect to get from them? How do you make it work?
Well, there's a lot of help out there. You guys are great at that. That you've developed a business that says if we lean into these startups, you'll get paid back and paid back in
Absolutely.
full. So I do think you do accept help where you used to not. We used to look at vendors, larger vendors, go, okay, you don't want to work with me. I'm too small. I'm not there. And that's just not the case. I think there's a lot of help. So that's part of it. But I do think the design principles of how to use the latest and greatest out of the hyperscalers is very important. We did that. So there's this thing called SASE. It's a network architecture. The Palo Altos, the Zscalers of the world do that. And they built it all 15 years ago. So when we saw, let's disrupt that area, we did it on the backs of the hyperscalers. Those are the best networks on the planet. Those are the incredibly fast, resilient networks. How do we leverage that? And we started with the understanding of the capabilities of those as if they were our capabilities. This is our extension. These are our networks. How do we use them well? And that allowed us to rethink a lot. And then we went to organizations like yourselves and said, hey, we're going to build this. And lo and behold, you reached out and said, actually, we've got another backplane coming. You should be on that. It's even faster. And yet we were to innovate yet further. So I think understanding that these hyperscalers, some of the APIs that are out there, some of the open source tools that are out there, understand that's all part of your Legos to play with, but only if you understand them well. So you do have to take the time like this to go and learn and get educated and understand why they do what they do. And I think that's the difference I had to get to. I used to show up to events like this and judge. I like that. That's dumb. That's smart. I like that. Now I just sit there and go, why? Why did they build that? Why did it need to be? And until I can answer the why, I don't allow myself to have a judgment on it. But once I get the why, now I can understand how it can fit in with me or how it won't. And I kind of see it evolve. Oh, wow, they're doing it for the reason I need. I need to follow that project. I need to be close to that. That's trying to build in the direction we require. So I think that's and you can move so fast now between open source and the hyperscalers. You can string together a monstrosity in a heartbeat if you let yourself.
All right, well, we have a little time left. I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience. If any of you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. We have mics that are circulating, and we will pass it to you. I can't tell if that guy there is scratching his head or no, he's scratching his head. So put your hand up, and there we go. We have a question over here.
Yeah, I have a question for either of you. In the world of AI, you can get consumers to share their most essential financial personal information with AI. You can create magic. Do you think consumers will ever feel safe enough to load a tax return, bank statement, a financial plan, and have AI models handle it?
Well, I can tell you for certain. So the question was, will consumers feel confident enough to share their most intimate information with an AI model, their financials, their healthcare, and the like? I don't think I have a friend that's not asking AI about health. They feel more comfortable to ask AI about health than they do anyone else. And if that barrier's gone, it's there. I think if you're a maker of a product, you have to appreciate you're going to end up with data you shouldn't have.
Well, I come from the world of finance, and two of the most important things in people's life is their health and their money. Mm-hmm. And they usually don't give a damn about their health till they lose it. So I'm not surprised that they're querying AIs about that. But I think financial details and personal information is a whole nother order. Nobody's going to steal your body.
I wish I agreed with you.
Well, I'll tell you, we are actually seeing that people are uploading their financial.
They're most definitely
uploading bank statements. That's one category of things they're doing. Also, we saw with OpenClaw, not only are they uploading it, they're actually giving their credentials.
Yes.
Their bank account credentials, their online account, and so that's already happening. And so one of the things that we as an industry need to think about is, how do we enable that safely? Because the demand is there. It is stunning how many downloads happened, how quickly, and how highly rated that was, which tells us that even though, honestly, it's borderline insane to give that level of access to something you haven't vetted, it's clear that people want to do that in a way that surprised everybody, to be honest. And so now the question is, okay, well, how do we make that safe for people to do, because they're doing it anyway, which is kind of startling.
If you're 20-something coming up right now, and you go to buy your first house, and somebody sends over the paperwork,
guess what they're doing?
They're going to throw it in one of the AI models and say, what does this mean? What's in here? What are the items? They're not going to read that. And they may not realize they're throwing in all their financial information when they do that. So they may agree with you, I'll never let AI have my financial information, then immediately send that contract up as if it doesn't have their financial information. And that's probably the great equalizer is we're sending up stuff to the cloud or up to the AI cloud that we don't even realize. And that's often how we're doing it. You have a co-work environment, you let it have access to your email, all these other items. It's going to look at stuff as it should to accomplish its task. So unfortunately, I think we have to appreciate as software makers, we're going to have data we shouldn't, and we should cleanse it as fast as possible from our environments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question over here. Well, you guys on. Over here.
So I work in education. I work as a service agency for about 63 school districts, and I collaborate in Texas with all school districts in Texas. It's interesting as a startup, you may have a little more freedom in the way you can collect data and you can absorb it and then process it with AI. But then when I think of like the scope of K through 12 education, there's so much we can do with GCP, with BigQuery, Vertex, all the components that make data collection analytics fantastic. And I really think it can improve education matrices. But then we have a lot of restrictions, and then we have a lot of pushback from parents. So whereas you might say, hey, someone's going to be sensitive to putting their bank account online, they're even more sensitive when it comes to an institution like a K through 12 school ingesting information of their kids and then pulling it. How can we navigate that as an organization, but really as a country where our country needs to focus on growth and development in AI systems?
So our browser sees everything, and we do support K through 12. And the Houston School District, for instance, are shipping us instead of laptops now, right? So they can do that. The approach we said is, we're going to collect everything you want, but anonymize it at the collection point. There was no reason to know Billy is the one that went there. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to understand what our students are doing, what a body of work is doing. And so you can get very valuable data without bringing a ton of risk back, but it's by design. After you have it is when most people try to get it. Gather all the data and then go anonymize it and break it down. You've already put yourself in a very dangerous position. It shouldn't have left that laptop in a way that was dangerous. It should leave the laptop in an anonymized way, but you're so right. There's data in there that can help us advance those kids and help those kids to be great, but it is not specific data. For now, it's not about this individual and how they behave and how we want to help them. That's a different tooling and a different approach and a different test methodology. But the mass understanding, I think it's very easy to deliver in a way that makes sense. Now, paranoia will always be there, and you have to calm people down and explain how you're doing it. But I think that's the essential key, is at point of data creation, create data you do not care if it gets out. If somebody hacks in and finds out kids go to this YouTube channel, the world will be a safe place. It's not a problem. But if they knew what Wi-Fi network, if they knew what the name of the kid was, if they knew the street address, now you're getting into some dangerous information that parents should be worried about.
Next question, okay, over there.
This is probably more for Mike. I'm curious what you were talking about in terms of enabling teams to kind of run with what they need to use their preferred solutions, et cetera, and kind of give that openness to them, along with kind of what Island does in terms of providing a browser as the central place where a lot of, or even perhaps all work happens. How do you think about that? How do your customers think about that? Is that a tension? And I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, if we get out of the startup conversation, it is very much a source of tension at the Fortune 5000. They aren't fans of a roll your own, use what you want kind of philosophy for a bunch of really good reasons. One, really hard to secure. If you got one of everything, you need a solution that can do one of everything, and that's just going to be overbearing and painful and difficult. The cost structure out of line, the ability to reuse models are out of line, like it all falls apart. So what we found is there are a couple preferences people have that are really important, and you have to deal with that, right? Which IDE you develop in, that could be very important to a developer. So those are but for the bulk of them, they're just going to know where they get stuff done. And our past security model was if you tried to go to a website you weren't allowed, we just blocked you. Nope, not allowed. So you literally started a game with the employee. Okay, I'll try it on Wi-Fi. Okay, I'll try it on the guest network. Okay, I got on, and we kind of said, if you can get there, then, you know, good for you. Now what we do is when we do that block, it's a redirect. Okay, you want to go here, heads up, here's our version of this. Let us know if you have a problem, if it doesn't work. And that redirect seems to be the simplest path and really changes the game. But you do need to understand shadow IT and what people are using. And what I love is we produce a data lineage graph. Here's where this data came from, produced, and you can literally watch an entire organization how they use data. And as a security team, you can look at it and say, boy, I'm making them take risks I shouldn't. Why do all of them go out to this model or go out to this area that wasn't part of our design? Why are they breaking it? Not that I want to stop it. I want to enable that safely and securely. And when security becomes the yes but group instead of the no, you know, I'm going to let you do that but this way. I'm going to give you that but I do it this way. It is a much better world to work in. And some of the more progressive companies get that. And then there does become a size where there is a little bit of my way or the highway because I can't manage it at scale.
All right, I think we have time for one last question over there. Yep.
Two questions, actually. So I'll just stand. So, yeah. Two questions, actually. The first is from a startup standpoint. You mentioned that there are two things that are moats, your speed of delivery and trust. Now, as Island, as a startup, you are going up against enterprise products that are there, right? Microsoft, Google, all the other browsers. And now with agentic capabilities, they can develop features quickly as well. So they have the trust and the speed. So how do you now approach this problem with AI coming in? And second, for both of you, with respect to Gemini Enterprise as well as Island as a browser, both of you want to have access to corporate data. But then a lot of companies, especially more in the European Union, would want to have their data on-premise. So how do you deal with that situation between on-prem versus cloud data? How do you convince customers?
Yeah, so let's start with the last one first, because I think the last one is way less of a concern than it should be. If early on you design a thought process that data stays with the customer, it gets very simple. And for us, with the customer, may mean in the hyperscaler, just dedicated to them, so I don't have to re-architect. We think of on-prem as in their data center, and it's got to be there. I don't have anybody pressuring me for that. But they do not want to be in a multi-tenant, you know, installment with me. They want to have it in there. So the design early on allows that to be very simple. We have it happen all the time. The next one that you started, that moat concept, very interesting. Don't view Microsoft or Google remotely as a competitor. I don't explain why I'm better than Chrome or why I'm better than Edge. I explain why I'm better than legacy DLP, why I'm better than, you know, different networking, why I can set up a data barrier others can't, and why I can work with all the models. So like our Cowork product works with everything. So a company that wants to do 4 different ones, that agnostic approach is essential.
Yeah, and I'll just say from our perspective on that second question, we provide our customers with a spectrum from use our cloud to in your region to, you know, in your data center all the way to air-gapped, and even geopatriation, which is the citizens of the people who can touch the data. We can let you control it. So with that, we are up at time. Thank you, Mike. You've been fantastic. Thank you all of you for making the time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.